about, talked about this point that was brought up in the presentation about asking for help and kind of knowing when to ask for help and who to ask for help. Some of the things that kind of the advice given were to, not be afraid to ask for help when you need it, regardless of what stage in your career you are. Trying to use your, gut feeling or intuition to kind of figure out who might be a good and valuable mentor. And then also thinking about asking for help in mentorship, about a mentorship team, and that not one mentor can bring you everything you would need, and kind of thinking about maybe a career mentors versus research and content mentors, and thinking about different pathways. We discussed different pathways for thinking about how to identify who might be a good mentor. The other kind of main thing that we talked about was talking about how to balance multiple interests into maybe a single research topic or a dissertation, really. And so the things that we talked about were talked about really following your passion and what you're really interested in. Many, your dissertation can be a long process and many people get really frustrated. And so if you work on something that you're really passionate about and motivated by, then that can help you kind of get through it. Also, to be careful not to take on too much. You can't solve the world with your dissertation, to make sure you balance it with being plausible or able to complete it. Also immersing yourself in the literature and also in the community and getting involved with the community to see multiple sides of an issue can also help you figure out what your interests are. And lastly, maybe trying to connect your interests, even if they seem disparate, maybe trying to find a high level theme or some way to organize them around a central theme if you to kind of organize them. And so those are kind of the main things I think that we talked about. I don't know if anyone else from my group wants to add anything.
No, thank you, Jenna. That was great. We had one grad student and an assistant professor in the room, and our community faculty and another senior level professor. So we were small but powerful. Thanks again, Adriana.
We could go on to Keith's group number 1, with Sandra.
We wanted to go in a group. We didn't assign a person.
You wanna? I can. So we talked about. I'll speak and I did take some notes. That's amazing in itself. So the scholars brought up issues around productivity and the pressure for productivity and the difference between doing a lot of work that may not lead to a paper, and all that work gets sort of like, it's sort of binary. Like you can do lots and lots of work on lots of important things and that gets 0 credit. And then the paper gets credit. And there's very little in between in the system in academia. So it's very binary. And then are there strategies so one, does that have to stay that way forever? Should that be the future? And so something we need to think about. So it was made that way at some point in time, but my point is always, we used to have slavery too. It doesn't mean everything has to stay that way forever. Are there strategies for getting protected time to write and work? And so we talked about, it's called WAGs, or writing accountability groups, where you can come together where maybe all the RCMAR scholars can come together for an hour or a half hour, and you put it on your calendar, and at the beginning of the meeting, everybody says what they're gonna do. And then you go away for 55 minutes, do it, and then you come back and you tell everybody what you did, right? So no one, this is self-report, peer activity, but it gives you formal, structured time. And then the other thing is, in your calendar, just put your RCMAR, put some stuff in your calendar for RCMAR and use it to write for RCMAR. right? And then we talked about committees and not being overwhelmed with committee work. And then for your mentoring team, think about who you need on your team, because you likely need different people, because if people can help you with what you're doing scientifically, but some people may be more of an advocate for you, right? So someone can be very helpful, but they may not be an advocate. And so you want someone who can be an advocate for you, either at your institution for growth and promotion, on professional organizations. And you may need someone who knows nothing about your science or work, but is helping you be a better person in life and navigate the things you need to do in life to reach what you want to reach. And then also, your mentors are going to have expectations of you, but you first need to check in and understand what your career goals are, what your aspirations are, what you enjoy doing. And those expectations they have for you, that may not be, what you want to do. You may want some of it, or they may be below. You may have higher expectations than they have of you, right? So just need to be thinking of those things like that. I don't know, anything else, team? Or we've gone over already?
I think we covered all of it. We had a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Group 2 is Susie and Kenrick.
We forgot to assign someone to take notes, but I'll try to summarize on some of the stuff I wrote down. First of all, I was in a room full of geniuses, so that was really exciting. But some of the topics that were brought up, and I'm going to talk real fast, was approachability with mentees, which also would be with mentors, and the importance of not getting overloaded with either. We talked about feeling held back by assumptions that are made sometimes of whether a person belongs in that group or not. And those assumptions can come from your gender, if you have an accent, your ethnicity. And we also talked about how even accents have prejudgments of intelligence. If you have a European accent, you're assumed to be brilliant. If you have a Spanish accent or a Southern accent, you're not viewed as intelligent. Those are just prejudgments. The importance of just showing up. Even when you have a tough day, you got to show up the next day and the next and the next. And that is real important. We talked about the constant challenges that are not only from institutions, but also from within your own family and friends, the cultural biases of whether you belong there. And let's see. Assumptions based on ethnicity problems was another thing that we talked about. And I think the last note I had was just a comment that I like to make for anyone out there who does have an accent, is to remind people that speaking with an accent does not mean you think with an accent. So again, it goes back to that prejudgment of what type of an accent you have. Group, anything else that we left out?
I just had two quick things I think that we brought up. One is that, 2020 has been a rough year, but one of the good things is I think hopefully we've all realized that you can't just keep things inside if there's things going on. You have to express yourself respectfully, but if there's issues that you see, you need to tell someone and make sure it's made aware of. You can't just swallow it inside and keep it there. I think that's a skill that we all should be learning, and I think is better than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. And then just Dr. Jones really reminded us that I guess she's had a lot of success with journaling. When things are hard, just writing things down and being grateful. There's all of us, we're all have a computer to be on Zoom. We have internet to be on it. We have a roof over our head. There's many things, even if your work life is challenging that day, to be grateful for. And then you can look back over time and see that, these obstacles were there, you overcame them. These were there, you overcame them. And there's nothing that breeds success like success, right? Is once you've done an obstacle, you can do the next one. I think that was very helpful advice.
Yeah, that's great.
Great.
Next up is group 3, Carol Lee and Arlene.
And I think I'm up as the reporter here. So correct me and add if I miss anything, you all. So we had similar conversations, topics that you all talked about, what counts and what doesn't count. And in the context of it was a little profound, the minority tax of having to do more because, and looking at mentoring on top of assigned mentorings and work. And some of the things we talked about is really knowing the criteria for promotion, being clear with your department head and in your department head what is valued, and looking at scheduling regular reviews with department head or department chair for that specific purpose to determine on track. And Arlene suggested CV review to look at the CV and know what counts and what doesn't. And we also talked about kind of the value proposition, the things that are critical to be doing. Of everything we can do, I think all of us have to do that in our lives, and really looking whether it's professional development, your service, your contribution, balancing those and having a value proposition. We talked a little bit as well about mentors and the value of mentors within your academic environment and those without, and really being strategic about alignments. We talked about research proposals and kind of applying for positions a little bit in one bucket, but really the idea of proposals being written with the reviewers' process and perspective in mind, and of addressing in looking at further advancement, being out front and addressing gaps or shortcomings that might appear from that opportunity, and addressing them head on to create a conversation rather than a negative. Anything else, group? Did I miss?
A great job, Carol Lee. One thing that Carol Lee said that I thought was fantastic is read the instructions. You know, if you're applying for a grant, if you are going for a job, make sure you've read what's there. And I know that the NIH would appreciate if we all read the instructions. So I thought that was
Forgot that one.
Thank you. Group 5, Luisa's group.
Oh, hi. We had a very interesting conversation. So so we had Leanne, who took excellent notes, and then Nassim, who is going to report on one contribution. She did a great job. And then Carmen was with us, and she had great insights, but she had to leave. So Nassim, you want to share what you share with the group?
Sure, yeah. One of the things we discussed was about like our own experiences as like minorities, and how that can shape as a positive experience throughout our own career and through the development. Like even for non-minorities, this will be very helpful if we look back at what experiences we have had and what experiences are like other scholars and other people have had when we were like working with them, when we were like students, whatever, and think about these things. And one of the very interesting things about like the academic job application is the diversity statement that they asked us. I'm not sure how many years this has been in like as something that we have to provide, but the diversity statement, especially I think for minorities, it opens up many things that are very important to consider for your own development, and also the people, the minorities that you want to help with along the way. And it will shape the way you think and the way you shape your future work. And for me, it also shaped my research as well. It was a combination of all these things. My insight has changed. Like the first time I decided to write this diversity statement, I thought about all my experiences from like 10 years back, like what positive and negative experiences I have had, and how I have been able to overcome those, and how I can help other minorities. I have had great mentors, so how can I help others in this way, and how I can use those as helping myself for the future of my own work. So this was one of the things we discussed. And one other interesting thing that we discussed was that we are usually focusing on negativity, and we are focused a lot on the problems, but we should focus more on the solutions. This was the comment that Carmen mentioned. Lisa, maybe you want to talk more about this issue?
Well, I'll mention it briefly because I think, you know, finishing with your note about, you know, diversity being our asset, I think that that was beautiful, and I was very happy to hear that. But yeah, another conversation that Carmen kind of brought up is that we researchers should think more about the solutions, right? We get very stuck on the data and showing the problem, but we really need to think about research that kind of builds towards policy change. I think that was kind of like our conversation too. But I love the point that Nassim made about, you know, diversity being an asset that we can use in the academia. So
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Last but not least, group 6, Naina Harawa.
Yeah, we had 4 people in our group. Mrs. Ziza, who I'm hoping maybe can chime in some, Kristen and Anna Choi. And we actually spoke a fair amount, just reflecting back on Dr. Norris's presentation and really appreciating how he broke it down and really brought certain things to the fore that stood out to us. One was talking about trauma and kind of a trauma-informed mentorship. One of the things we talked about was actually wanting to maybe at some point delve into that more and really talk a little bit more about what some of those tools might be as a mentor, because it's kind of a tricky kind of, I think, route to take, but I think it's a very important one. And then also really appreciating the whole discussion of the burden that having a minority status often imposes. And Aziza shared her experience of being part of some type of a session where students had to write down how often they thought about their race, ethnicity, and there was a huge difference. And there's other research actually that Kamar Jones has done showing this, that people of color think about that quite a bit more than others do. And so along with the traumas and the other sorts of things, there's just a burden associated with that, being in that status. One of the things we started talking about at the end was dealing with racist experiences, both the more aggressive ones, which people talked about either experiencing themselves more often or actually having students talk about experiencing more often, and then as well microaggressions, which are probably what we experience more commonly within the academic setting. And so I talked a little bit about, you know, some of how I've dealt with that, some of which is trying to confront it in the moment, but maybe confronting is the wrong word, because often that's sort of political, but trying to often just ask questions, you know, well, what exactly did you mean by that? You know, when you said this, I felt a little bit uncomfortable. Could you clarify what you meant? And then it gives the speaker a chance to reflect on how what they said may have come across, and that can sometimes clear things up or at least give an opportunity for learning. And then, sometimes I do that at a different time, set up an appointment to talk with somebody or have a conversation with them offline, and that can also be effective. So I'd love to hear if Aziza wanted to add anything more.
No, I think you covered it. Excuse me. I think you covered it pretty well. Thank you.
All right. And did anybody else? Actually, I think we lost both Anna and Kristen. But yeah, I guess I want to go back to that last point, because I think it's scary. But in my experience, I mean, having many experiences where I spoke up and many where I didn't, I almost always felt better where I spoke up in one way or another. Wasn't always in the moment, but I almost, and the times when I didn't, and I felt like something rather problematic had been said, that would usually bother me for a long time. And I think it's just a disempowering experience, even though it feels safer not to say anything. I think it's often very disempowering in the long run. It kind of sort of eats away at your spirit. So I would encourage people to find ways to speak up. Yeah, Steve.
So this is something where I've often thought it would be helpful if we did some role plays, because I know frequently I'll be in a meeting or in a class and somebody says something and an hour later I go, oh, I should have said, or like I know something's wrong and I feel uncomfortable, but it's not a reflex reaction yet. So, and I think that would probably be useful for everybody, regardless of background. Just like, you're in this situation, okay, I'm gonna role play, I'm gonna say blah, 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 what do you say? So that you've said it a couple times, so that when you hear that or you feel that way, it's like, oh yeah, I've got this down.
Yeah, and I think as Naina said, amongst the strategies, but probably the most common one that I hear talked about and that we use and recommend is to ask people first clarify what it was they meant or what it was they said, right? Because that's not confrontational, just asking them to clarify. It's giving them the benefit of the doubt, and it gives them a chance to say it or reframe it, because they can think about it, and like as they're going to say it again, like, maybe I want to say it like that. Maybe they do, I don't know, right? But then that opens the door for a small dialogue that's more that calling in, where you know, so you haven't called someone out, it is opportunity to have some discussion about it and to address it there, and see what happens.
I should do a workshop on that. I think we've all experienced microaggressions, and it was I like the idea of role playing, and I think we can all bring lots of examples and just sort through them and do a little role playing, especially with our scholars.
You know,
I think
I've had a
that's a great idea
situation.
for the spring retreat, actually. So let's maybe Carol, Christina, Art, we can think about how to set up a workshop in the spring on that.
I've had a situation where someone will be talking and denigrating Latinos or something, generalizing, and I've piped in and said, "What did you mean by that?" Their immediate response is, "Oh, I'm not talking about you. You know, I'm talking about other people." But it's like, that's the immediate reflection of, "Oh, I'm not talking about you." Well, you are, because I happen to be Mexican. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, so let me ask you that question one more time. What do you mean by that?
But yeah, I also, and I think to your point, Steve, about sometimes you realize much later, or like what you could have said, or and can you still say something? And I think sometimes you even can later. I mean, I'm not saying always, but I think there are times, and sometimes I try to put myself in the other person's situation. Like, shoot, if I had really stuck my foot in my mouth and I didn't realize it, would I want somebody to come to me? Like I would, you know? And so, you know, I can't say that everybody's like that, but I think we can give people a chance to rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Well, I think we're past, I don't know, I think we're past the 14 minutes past the 5 o'clock ending. So I think we'll just sort of say on behalf of RCMAR, we want to thank everybody for their participation in both Monday and today's sessions. Great conversations, great presentations. So we're really, I think, as sort of the faculty leadership, really excited about our community partners, our scholars, and the rest of the mentors that are participating, taking time out of their schedule. Had some great presentations from the scholars who have some amazing work going forward and amazing community partners to work with. I want to thank everybody for their keynote talks, our partners at NIA who've just been wonderful and spending plenty of time with us both day, day after day, and participating, not just in giving keynotes, but participating in listening and in the breakout sessions. So I think that's been really great. And now we have some ideas for and some suggestions for future workshops as well, for future activities during future retreats that look like there'll be workshops based on some of the recommendations, like probably a combination of things. So unlike some of the others where it's safe travels home, it's going to be safe travels logging off, I guess. I think